All right, so today we're diving deep into crossing the chasm.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those concepts you hear all the time in business and tech.
Right. Everyone throws it around.
But I have a feeling a lot of us
Yeah.
don't actually have a solid grasp on what it really means or how to apply it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that's where Warren Schertzinger's article comes in.
Chasm Crossing Confusion. Right.
Exactly.
Great title, by the way.
Chasm Crossing Confusion. It really is a great title.
It gets you thinking.
Because it highlights the problem.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of, well, confusion around this whole concept.
And it's not just like people who are new to this stuff, even seasoned professionals
Oh, yeah.
get tripped up by some of these misconceptions.
So our mission today is to unpack that confusion.
Absolutely.
To really dissect this idea of crossing the chasm.
And maybe debunk some of those myths along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is that even Everett Rogers,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
the guy who practically invented the technology adoption life cycle.
Right. The early adopter guy.
Yeah, diffusion of innovations.
Yeah.
Like the textbook on this stuff.
Yep.
He wasn't even on board with this whole chasm thing.
I know, right? It's kind of mind-blowing.
It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The guy who literally wrote the book on this disagrees with this fundamental concept.
It makes you wonder how this idea got so ingrained in our thinking.
Right. Like, how did it become such a cornerstone of business strategy?
Well, I think part of it is the way we simplify things. Like, we love to categorize and create frameworks.
Yeah.
And the chasm fits nicely into that.
It's like a neat little visual.
Yeah, it's a story we can tell ourselves.
But the reality is, as Rogers pointed out, innovation adoption is more of a spectrum.
It's not a series of, like,
Yeah.
rigid steps with a giant gap in between.
Exactly. It's more fluid, more dynamic.
And that's where the confusion starts, I think.
So before we dive into the misconceptions, let's just quickly recap what we mean by the chasm,
Good idea.
just for anyone who needs a refresher.
Yeah, level set.
So in the technology adoption lifecycle,
Mm-hmm.
you have those different groups of adopters, right?
Innovators, early adopters, early majority.
And then the late majority and laggards.
Yep.
And the chasm is that gap
Yeah.
between the early adopters who are like,
Adventurous ones.
yeah, the risk takers, the ones who love to try new things.
You're on the bleeding edge.
And then the early majority who are a bit more cautious.
Yeah, they want to see some proof that something works.
They want social proof. They want reviews.
Testimonial.
They want to see other people using it successfully.
Exactly.
And that gap between those two groups,
Yeah.
that's the chasm.
It's where a lot of products, a lot of great ideas
Yeah.
fail to gain that widespread acceptance.
They get stuck.
They just can't seem to make that leap.
And the article argues that a lot of this has to do with,
Mm-hmm.
well, misunderstanding what the chasm actually is
And when it applies.
and how to approach it.
Right.
So the article outlines 6 key misconceptions.
6, yeah.
6 areas where even experienced professionals kind of get tripped up.
Yep.
And we're going to go through each one of those.
Let's do it.
But first up
Yeah.
is this idea of mischaracterizing the innovation itself.
Interesting.
So the article is saying not every new product,
Right.
not every new gadget or app or service
Not every shiny new thing.
is facing a chasm.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's got to be something truly groundbreaking, right?
Well, it has to be a certain type of innovation.
Okay, so what kind of innovation are we talking about?
The article talks about novel innovations.
Novel.
Yeah. Yeah, the kind that really force us to change our behavior.
So it's not just about
Mm-hmm.
like incremental improvements
Right.
or like refinements on existing products.
It's about something that's truly new and different.
Okay, so give me an example.
Well, think about the first iPhone.
Okay, yeah.
That was a novel innovation.
It completely changed how we interacted with technology.
Exactly.
It wasn't just a slightly better cell phone.
Right.
It was a whole new paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that
Yeah.
like a new flavor of soda wouldn't face the chasm,
Probably not.
but a revolutionary new way to produce food might?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction here.
Good.
So it's about the disruptive nature of the innovation.
That's a key factor.
How much it forces us to change our thinking and our behavior.
Right.
And this leads to another misconception.
Okay.
The article debunks this idea
Mm-hmm.
that the chasm is only a problem for startups.
Ah, yes, that's a common one.
Like it's only those small, scrappy companies
Yeah, the underdogs.
that have to worry about crossing this chasm.
But that's not always the case.
So you're saying established companies
Yeah,
can face this challenge too.
absolutely.
Even big companies with tons of resources.
If they're launching a truly innovative product, something that's really disruptive,
they can still get stuck in that chasm.
it's not about company size.
Right.
It's about the nature of the innovation itself.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that leads us to another interesting point.
Oh, what's that?
The chasm applies to the application of a technology,
The application.
not the technology itself.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so let's say you have a new technology, like, I don't know, artificial intelligence.
Okay.
AI can be applied in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, from self-driving cars to medical diagnosis
To tactile.
to, like, writing poetry.
Even that.
Yeah.
So the article argues that the chasm doesn't apply to AI as a whole.
Okay.
It applies to each specific application of AI.
So one application might cross the chasm
Yeah.
while another one struggles.
Right, even though they're both using the same underlying technology.
That's a pretty subtle distinction,
It is.
but it's important.
Yeah, because it means we have to be more nuanced in our thinking.
We can't just say, oh, AI is going to change the world.
Right.
We have to ask,
Yeah.
how is AI being applied?
And who is it being applied for?
And is that specific application facing a chasm?
Exactly.
And the example they give in the article is remote patient monitoring.
RPM.
Yeah, RPM.
So this is the idea of
Yeah.
using technology to monitor a patient's health
Mm-hmm.
outside of a traditional healthcare setting.
Like with wearable devices and sensors and stuff.
Exactly.
So the article is saying just because one application of RPM,
Yeah.
like monitoring diabetes, for example,
Right.
has gained mainstream acceptance.
Which it has, by the way.
Yeah, I've seen those ads.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that all RPM applications across the chasm,
Right. There might be other applications.
like monitoring mental health, for instance, that are still struggling to find their footing
They might be facing their own unique chasm.
and their own unique set of challenges.
Precisely.
So even within a single technology, there can be multiple chasms.
Depending on how it's being used.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complexity of this whole concept.
It's not as simple as we often make it out to be.
Now, this next misconception is something I know I've definitely fallen for.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
It's this idea that people's psychographics are static.
Meaning?
Like, if someone is an early adopter for one thing, they'll be an early adopter for everything.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
They're just wired that way.
Like, they're just those early adopter types.
Right, and the article is saying
Yeah.
that's just not true.
It's a myth.
It's a dangerous myth.
It is.
Because it leads to all sorts of bad decisions.
Right, like marketing to the wrong people.
Exactly.
Or developing products that nobody wants.
So what's the reality then?
The reality is that people are complex. We don't fit neatly into these fixed categories.
We're not robots.
Right.
With predictable programming.
We're humans.
We make choices based on, well, a whole bunch of different factors.
Our individual needs, our priorities.
Our values, our beliefs, our social context.
Yeah, all of that.
And the article argues that
yeah.
we choose our level of adoption based on the specific innovation.
Right.
And how it fits into our lives.
So someone might be an early adopter of, let's say, electric vehicles.
Okay.
Because they're passionate about sustainability and they see it as a way to reduce their carbon footprint.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that same person might be a laggard when it comes to, I don't know, virtual reality gaming.
Yeah.
Because they're not that interested in video games.
Or they're worried about motion sickness.
Right, or they just don't see the value in it.
So it's not about being an early adopter. It's about how a specific innovation aligns with our individual needs and values.
And our circumstance.
And our context.
Exactly.
So I guess what you're saying is we need to be more careful about making assumptions about people.
Yeah, don't put people in boxes.
Based on their past behavior.
Because they might surprise you.
And we need to be more thoughtful about how we design and market our innovations.
Absolutely.
Because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It's about understanding the nuances of human behavior.
And adapting our strategies accordingly.
This is really making me rethink how I approach technology adoption.
Good.
Both personally and professionally.
That's the goal.
It's like you said earlier.
Yeah.
We're peeling back the layers of this seemingly simple idea and discovering all this hidden complexity.
And that complexity is what makes it so interesting.
It is.
It's a challenge.
But it's also an opportunity.
Absolutely.
An opportunity to be more innovative, more strategic.
And ultimately, more successful.
Bringing new ideas to the world.
That's what it's all about.
So we've covered a lot of ground already,
We have.
but we're just getting started.
I know. I can't wait to dig into the rest of these misconceptions.
Me too. There's so much more to unpack.
Buckle up.
This is going to be a wild ride.
It is. Okay, so where were we?
We were talking about misconceptions.
Right. Those pesky misconceptions.
So crossing the chasm.
Yeah, the things that trip people up.
Even smart people.
Even the experts sometimes.
And we've covered a few already.
We talked about mischaracterizing the innovation.
Right. Not everything is a chasm-crossing innovation.
It's got to be something truly novel, something disruptive.
And we talked about how it's not just a startup problem.
Established companies can face the chasm, too.
Especially if they're trying to do something really innovative.
Right, something that challenges the status quo.
And then we talked about how the chasm applies to the application of a technology.
Not the technology itself.
Which is a really important distinction.
Yeah, it's subtle, but it's crucial.
So what's next on our list of misconceptions?
Well, the article talks about this idea that chasm theory applies to low-cost consumer products.
Okay, interesting.
But that's not really what it was designed for.
So you're saying like the latest fidget spinner or like a new flavor of potato chip?
Kids aren't really facing a chasm.
Because they're not those big, risky innovations.
Exactly.
They don't require significant changes in behavior.
They're learning new things.
So what kinds of products do we need to worry about?
The article talks about things like enterprise software, complex medical devices. Those are the kinds of innovations where the chasm really comes into play.
Because they're expensive.
Often, yes.
They require a lot of training.
And they involve a higher level of risk.
So it's not just about whether something is new and different.
Right.
It's about the scale and impact of the innovation itself.
And the potential consequences of adopting it.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the final misconception...
Okay, hit me with it.
...is this idea that chasm theory applies equally across all industries.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's something we tend to assume.
Like the same rules apply everywhere.
Right, but the article points out that some industries have unique characteristics.
That might skew the traditional adoption curve.
Exactly.
So what kind of industries are we talking about?
Well, they give the example of clean energy, which is heavily influenced by government subsidies.
Right, and tax breaks and incentives.
All sorts of things that can artificially boost adoption.
So it might look like a product has crossed the chasm.
Yeah.
When in reality...
it's being propped up by external factors.
And if those factors were to go away...
the product might suddenly plummet back into the chasm.
That's a really important point.
That is.
Because it means we can't just blindly apply chasm theory.
We have to consider the context.
The specific industry.
The regulatory environment.
The competitive landscape.
All of those things can influence how a product is adopted.
This is all starting to make me wonder. How many businesses have made bad decisions based on a flawed understanding of crossing the chasm?
I'm sure it happens all the time.
Like imagine pouring tons of money into marketing to the wrong audience.
Because you assume everyone who's tech savvy will automatically embrace your latest gadget.
Or investors making decisions based on the assumption that a certain industry follows a predictable adoption curve.
When in reality,
there are all these unique factors at play.
It can throw everything off.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It can be.
So what can we do to avoid these mistakes?
Well, that's what this whole deep dive is about.
It's about educating ourselves,
challenging our assumptions,
and thinking critically about how we approach innovation and adoption. Whether we're developing new products, investing in startups,
or just trying to understand the world around us.
It's about being more informed, more strategic,
and ultimately more successful.
I like that.
And to illustrate some of these points, I thought it might be helpful to look at some real-world examples.
Oh, I love real-world examples.
They bring the concepts to life.
They make it more concrete, more relatable.
Exactly.
So let's start with a success story.
Okay.
A company that successfully navigated the chasm.
A classic example is Apple with the iPod.
Oh, yeah, the iPod.
Remember those?
Of course I had one.
Back when MP3 players were clunky and complicated.
Yeah, they were like little bricks.
Apple came along with this sleek, intuitive device.
It was a game changer.
It revolutionized how people listen to music.
And it wasn't just the technology.
Right.
It was the whole experience.
The design, the marketing, the way it fit into people's lives.
That was like a cultural phenomenon.
Everyone had one or wanted one.
So how did they do it?
Well, they understood that crossing the chasm wasn't just about the technology itself.
This is about the whole package.
Exactly.
The user experience, the brand, the ecosystem.
They targeted a specific niche.
Okay, who did they go after?
Those early adopters.
The tech enthusiasts.
Yeah, the people who were passionate about music and technology.
And they built momentum from there.
They created a buzz.
And then the early majority started to take notice.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
So they focused on delighting a specific group of customers rather than trying to please everyone right from the start.
That's a key insight.
It's about finding that beachhead market.
Yeah, that niche within the early majority.
That can help you gain traction
And credibility.
before expanding to wider markets. So Crossing the Chasm is like a military campaign.
I like that analogy.
You need to secure a strategic foothold before launching a full-scale invasion.
Exactly.
You need a focused strategy.
A deep understanding of your target market.
And a willingness to adapt and evolve as you go.
That's the essence of it.
Okay, so we've seen how it can be done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the flip side?
What about the companies that failed to cross the chasm?
What can we learn from their mistakes?
Well, there are plenty of examples.
Give me a good one.
Segway.
That's it. Oh, yeah.
Those two-wheeled, self-balancing scooters.
They were supposed to revolutionize personal transportation.
They generated a lot of buzz initially.
Yeah, I remember thinking they were so cool.
But they never really caught on.
Why not?
Well, there were several factors.
Okay, like what?
First, the price was a major barrier.
They were expensive, weren't they?
Yeah, too expensive for most people.
So practicality was an issue.
Absolutely.
They were also kind of bulky.
Yeah, and difficult to store.
And I remember hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't allowed on sidewalks in a lot of cities.
Right, there were regulatory hurdles.
So it sounds like they failed to address
Yeah.
some key practical concerns.
That would have made them more appealing to a wider audience.
And they didn't really target a specific niche market either.
Right, they tried to be everything to everyone. And as a result,
They didn't resonate with any particular group.
strongly enough to build that crucial early momentum. It's a classic example of how a cool technology...
Doesn't guarantee market success.
You need more than just a cool idea.
You need a solid strategy.
A deep understanding of your target market.
And a willingness to adapt and evolve.
Exactly.
It's not about hype and buzzwords.
It's about substance.
And execution.
And a little bit of luck, maybe.
These real-world examples are so helpful.
I think so, too.
They really bring the concept to life.
They show how these misconceptions can play out in the real world.
Both for better and for worse.
And that's why it's so important to think critically about these concepts.
To question assumptions.
To dig deeper than the surface level.
Because the more we understand
Yeah.
the nuances of crossing the chasm, the better equipped we'll be
to make informed decisions.
about innovation and adoption.
Whether we're business leaders, investors,
We're just curious individuals.
trying to make sense of the world around us.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes.
I'm glad to hear that.
I feel like I'm starting to see the world through a new lens.
What kind of lens?
One that's more critical, more analytical, more attuned to the subtle dynamics of innovation and adoption.
That's what we hope to achieve with these deep dives.
It's not just about summarizing an article.
Right.
It's about dissecting it.
Analyzing the implications.
And hopefully helping you avoid those costly mistakes. It's like a masterclass in crossing the chasm myth busting.
I like that.
I feel like I'm getting a crash course in critical thinking.
About business strategy.
And about life in general.
It all connects.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking about my own experiences with technology.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the gadgets and apps I've used over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing I've totally fallen for some of these misconceptions myself.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely bought into the hype
Yeah.
and rushed to adopt new technologies.
Especially when it's something that sounds really cool and futuristic. It's
Exactly.
easy to get swept up in that fall.
So how can we be more savvy about the tech we choose to embrace?
Well, I think it starts with being a critical consumer.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Don't just take marketing claims at face value.
Right, don't believe everything you read.
Do your research, read reviews, talk to people who are already using the technology.
Get some real-world perspective.
Exactly.
So it's like anything else.
Mm-hmm.
An informed consumer makes better choices.
Absolutely.
And I guess it's also about being honest with ourselves about our own needs and priorities.
Right. Don't adopt a technology just because it's trendy.
Or because everyone else is doing it.
Exactly.
Will it actually make your life better? Or just add more complexity?
That's the key question.
So being mindful and intentional about our tech choices.
I like that.
And maybe a little bit skeptical.
A healthy dose of skepticism is always good.
You know what else?
What's that?
Don't be afraid to be a late adopter.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes it pays to wait and see how a technology evolves.
Especially with expensive gadgets.
Yeah, or anything that might quickly become obsolete.
Patience is a virtue.
Even in the tech world.
Uh-huh, absolutely.
So by being critical, intentional, and patient, we can make smarter choices about the technologies that shape our lives.
That's the goal.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Glad you found it valuable.
We've busted myths, explored real-world examples, and gotten a much deeper understanding of what crossing the chasm really means.
It's a complex concept.
But it's an important one.
And I think the key takeaway is, it's not a one-size-fits-all formula.
Right, it's not a magic bullet.
It's a framework for thinking about innovation and adoption.
A set of principles to guide our decisions.
But it needs to be applied thoughtfully.
And with an awareness of the context.
Exactly.
So next time someone throws around the phrase, crossing the chasm, we'll be ready to have a real conversation about it.
Cutting through the buzzwords.
Getting to the heart of the matter.
That's the idea.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Another deep dive. Complete.
We've plumbed the depths of crossing the chasm.
Unearthing misconceptions.
And uncovering insights.
That can help us navigate this ever-evolving landscape of technology.
It's been a journey.
It has.
But a rewarding one.
Absolutely.
So until next time,
keep
diving deep.
Stay curious.
And as always, challenge those assumptions.
That's the key.